Koushik, thank you very much for joining us. To start with, how do you see the ISSB fitting into a jurisdiction such as India, which is already well advanced in using the GRI standards as well as developing your own reporting requirements around sustainable development goals?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I think Indian companies and Indian regulators have been promoting the importance of sustainability reporting for some time. And as we speak, the Securities Exchange Board of India, the SEBI, has already mandated a format of sustainability reporting for the top 1,000 companies listed in India, which is on a template, what they call as the business responsibility and sustainability reporting, which is the BRSR, which kind of adopts the best of global standards and ensures that the stakeholders, readers, analysts get a full 360-degree view of the company's financial and non-financial part of the business. And it is just not, while it is in a questionnaire format, it's just not about reporting data, but it's also about the principles, the governance, the strategies, the risk and opportunities, much as we see the same being articulated in the ISSB through the TCFD framework. So I think that once the ISSB standards become more and more developed, Indian companies and Indian regulators will look forward to adopt the best practices globally and ensure that the companies report on those standards by whatsoever name called. And I think that the substance will be more critical than just the format or the reporting format. And I think by doing that, Indian companies would effectively align with the global standards. And I think that will become very critical. And for India, which is looking to become a larger and larger economy, where international stakeholders, investors, rating agencies, and others have a lot more stake in the future, such reporting standards would be greatly useful. And I'm sure that the Indian companies will look forward towards it.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Koushik. And indeed, that global baseline will really put companies around the world on the same level of data, a global language of sustainability, giving access to capital, access to markets. Now, Tata Steel was the first Indian company to transition to the integrated reporting framework. And today, India has become one of the strongest countries in terms of integrated reports. How can the integrated reporting framework help to integrate traditional financial reporting with sustainability-related financial disclosure?
Yeah, so when we look at integrated reporting framework, the IR framework, which still continues to be relevant under the ISSB process, I think it gives a very good view of the 6 capitals. And obviously, the financial capital is one such capital, which is how the financial capital actually influences the rest of the 5 capitals, and how do the 5 capital influence the financial capital. So that interdependency comes across very strongly in an IR framework, and the management is forced to think, management and the boards are forced to think in terms of this interoperability of the financial reporting and non-financial reporting, and how do the best use of resources ensure the future sustainability of the company. And I think, therefore, it is a fantastic tool for companies, boards, including the investors, to look at a company from an IR lens, because that's very holistic. It is principle-based, but it is something which gives a very robust platform for companies to report it, especially if one goes through an assurance process as well of the data that is being used.
That's very interesting, indeed, tying it into the assurance process and that quality of data. You know, one of the ISSB's requirements, once phased in, is to report financial data at the same time as sustainability data. So to continue that thought process about the quality and assurance, what can a company do in terms of governance and processes and even the teams involved to achieve that, reporting sustainability related information at the same time, at the same level of quality?
Yeah, so I think what I mentioned earlier in India, the BRSR report is a report that has to be published along with the financial performance. And therefore, it is important for us to look at it from that perspective and ensure that it doesn't come in as on top as a separate sustainability information data, clouding out the whole process of the linkage between the financial reporting and the non-financial reporting. So I think it is important that the regularity of reporting of sustainability and its indicators is as important as reporting the financial data. So in my view, we are perhaps just at the threshold of seeing a huge convergence of financial reporting and non-financial reporting into what I would say as the corporate reporting of the company. And therefore, that I think will drive the convergence, and that will ensure that the companies report the non-financials along with the financials. And like what we have, the financial statement, the balance sheet, and the profit and loss and cash flows, etc., we will have, or we should have, the non-financial reporting along with it, so that a stakeholder gets a 360-degree view of both the financial and non-financial indicators.
Well, I like that, a 360-degree view, indeed, a complete picture of performance. So a last question, the ISSB's industry-based approach will yield information most useful for investor decisions. It's also cost-effective, efficient for companies because they can focus on an industry-specific subset of metrics. Do you see this requirement, the ISSB's requirement for companies to consider the SASB standards as helpful in identifying relevant ESG factors and metrics to disclose on them?
I think, so far, when we look at sustainability KPIs or reporting, if I look at the frameworks of multiple frameworks that existed, the problem was comparability within a sector or an industry. And by adopting a sector-specific approach and taking the SASB standards as a baseline, I think this is a very helpful use, because for investors, for companies themselves, to look at peers and know that they are really benchmarking between apples and not apples and oranges, because each industry has its own uniqueness, nuances, challenges, and risks, which cannot get always. Of course, there is a broader baseline, but then there are standards for each. If I take, for example, the metals and mining, if there is a standards for metals and mining, it will be more comparable, it will be consistent, and it will give people who look at these a more holistic and a critical view of what to compare and what not to compare. So I think this is a very welcome approach. I think when it comes across, the users, the preparers will find it worthwhile. It will be more decision-centric reporting, because I would get a sense of how am I vis-a-vis my peers, both globally and nationally, and others will see the same. And therefore, I think it will help in the pathway of improving the standards, disclosure quality, and also taking decisions on the right path to become more sustainable. So I think this is truly welcome, and I think the entire industry across sectors are waiting for these standards to come out.
That's really helpful, and I like this term, decision-centric reporting. I think we should use that much more. Koushik, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.